can see it next week. So we're beginning week 2 right now. I'll share out my screen and share the class outline for today. So let me know when you guys can see this.
Yep.
All right, great. So week 2, looking at cell and range manipulation. So this is going to revolve around how we select cells and ranges within Excel, how we enter data into cells and ranges, how we can read data from these locations. And then I'm hoping that we have some time towards the end. We'll kind of take a half step into what we're going to be looking in week 3, which is going to be revolving around assigning data to variables. And I'm kind of bumping this partially up to this week because I think it'll be necessary when we try to read data from cells into a VBA variable. So we'll get into that as well. And then towards the end, looking into selecting full ranges as well as determining the last row or last column within a range, which is really handy to make your VBA code more robust and not have to set the hard-coded row or column every time, because as you know, a given table that we work with isn't always going to be the same in the same range. It could have different last row or different column number of columns. So this is going to be handy for us as well. So that's kind of the outline for today. I guess we'll begin by doing a quick little overview of what we covered in week 1. That said, I don't think there was too much. We didn't really even get into coding. So that should be just a quick few minutes, and then we'll hop right into the week 2 material. And again, I probably don't need to really flash this, but please follow along on your computers. Hopefully, I know Marianne had an issue with not having a second monitor, but hopefully all of you guys do, so you can follow along with what I'm doing, and then also have a workbook open on your computer and do some of the steps for yourself. And again, please stop me at any time, ask questions. Fortunately, we still have a small group, and it's we can really go at whatever speed you guys want. So jump in whenever you have anything to add. All right, great. So now, can everyone open an Excel workbook? I'm just opening a new instance of Excel, so nothing. I don't have anything pre-recorded in this either, so you guys should all be at the same step as me right now.
Oh, I opened the file we did last week. So I should open the brand new one?
I mean, that's fine too. If it's helpful for you to keep recording macros in an existing workbook, I mean, maybe you could open up a new module this week and call it week 2, so you have all of the existing work. Maybe that's a good idea for everyone. I'll just be doing it in a blank workbook, but you're welcome to do that if you'd like.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so for me, this is the blank workbook. I'll hide the presenting piece so you can see what we're doing up here. Let's just begin by going into the developer tool. Quick little overview of what we covered last week with this code grouping in the top left corner. So we have the Visual Basics editor. I can open that, and it's looking at something in a different module. But if I go to this workbook, yeah, that was looking at my personal macro workbook, but now here we see just the blank one. Here's the VBA editor. We can add in a new module, which we'll be doing anyways. So we have this new module, and then we would be able to enter any code we have in here. I'll close that. Just a refresher, the record macro feature. Let's say I want to do just a really simple one. I'll record it just as named macro1 into this workbook. let's just say in cell 1, I want to write my name, Zach, enter, stop recording, and then we can see that now it actually created a new module for us here. But here we have, and so this is actually what we'll be getting into today, how we'll be writing and entering simple code or simple data into cells. But here we see it just is saying ActiveCell, it enters my name. So just a refresher on how to record a macro. I can delete that and close out of the editor. And then lastly, the macros button, which we touched last time. So you can set it to be looking at all open workbooks, your personal workbook. We'll use book 1 because that's the one I'm in right now, and we'll be recording everything into this workbook. So we have nothing in it right now, but you can see how you would select which location you're going to run the macro from. I'll hit cancel here because we're not going to run anything. So I know I breezed through that in a minute or two, but any questions on the refresher from last week? All right, I'll take that as a no. So now let's begin with week 2, and we'll start by doing some basic selection of cells and ranges within a workbook. And I know that this topic might not be the most exciting to start off with, but it's going to become really useful when we get into starting to loop and use for and if statements and whatnot. It's just like kind of the basics, and we'll start there for today. So I'm going to open up the Visual Basic editor, and maybe I can go split screen so you can see the workbook as well as the VBA code we're editing. Now, for most of the class today, the nice thing is everything is really tangible. You can think about it in similar ways and similar vocabulary to how we use Excel, given that everything really exists within like moves we do within the workbook. So there's nothing getting too tricky today with loops. It's mostly just how we would select data or enter data into cells within the workbook. So the nice thing is that since we're all familiar with Excel, we can now just kind of think one step on top of that of really what we're doing, and then that's going to be the basis for our VBA code. So let's begin. I'll begin with, just like I was saying, some basic range and cell selection. So let's say we want to select cell B2. That'll be our first example. So we're just going to want it so we end with the cursor moved into B2. So that's the cell we're selecting. So we'll go into the VBA editor, create a sub, short for subroutine, as I learned from Annabelle last week. So we can call it select B2, and then open and close paren. And now within here, there's actually a few different ways you can select a cell within VBA. We'll start with the method of using the cell reference. So we can enter in cells, and then it'll ask you, so cells, open parentheses, and then it'll ask you for the row and column index that you want to select. So here, the row is row 2, and the column is column 2. So that'll be cell B2, but it's kind of in the R1C1 formatting if you want to think about it that way. And so now that we have the cell, then there's an action that we can do with the cell. So we'll do a period, and then if we enter select, this should be a macro that selects cell B2. So let's say we have the cursor somewhere else here on the sheet, and I hit play here. So I just ran the macro, and you might remember that one way to run the macro is to click the green arrow within the VBA editor, and you can see that the cursor jumps into cell B2. So this is a pretty simple formula, or a simple macro, but it's just telling it that we want to jump into cell B2. So any questions there? All right, great. I guess fast learners, that's a pretty easy one. So we'll now look into another way of selecting. I guess we'll use cell B2 again. So I'll just keep building the macros on top of each other here within this same module. And sorry, are you guys all following along on your machines there?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So then we'll do option 2 for selecting a given cell. So you have sub select. We'll do B2 again. Option 2. Open and close the parentheses, and you'll see that once it recognizes that there's a new sub, it will add in a line, and that's just for easy visualization, knowing where one macro ends and the next one begins. So we can just layer them all on top of each other within the same module. So now the second way of selecting a given cell is using the range feature. So instead of entering cell 2, 2, now we can actually enter the specific cell we're looking for. And let's say, again, we're using B2. So this time you have to put it in quotes, because it's the name of the cell, so you have to enter it as a string. And it's going to be pretty much the same after that. So range B2 dot select. And then if I move the mouse somewhere else and run this macro, again, hops back into B2. So not too complex there, just lets you move the cursor around the sheet. And this is going to be very useful for when we start working with tables and we want to be moving around from cell to cell, and you can automate that entire process. So it probably doesn't look that useful right now, but it will become quite necessary as we continue to learn here.
So the both routine are the same, really doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. These both do the same thing. Then there are going to be different circumstances when where one's going to be better than the other.
Mm-hmm.
So the top one, the nice thing about this is we actually have the cell location kind of as a coordinate, and we have integers which define that. So when we get into loops, it's going to be nice to have it with the cell, using the cell's way of calling a cell, because then you can set one of the coordinates. Like we could set the row to a variable, so we could have it be cell I, 2, and then we could loop through a given set of integers. So we could have it do something for 1, 2, then go to 2, 2, then 3, 2, and that would let us move from cell B1, so 1, 2 to 2, 2, 3, 2. So that's really handy when we have a list or something that we want to be cycling through. That this notation might be better for us. And then there's going to be instances where the range notation is better.
Okay.
But yeah, good question. So this is selecting one cell. Then let's say we want to select a range of cells. So I'll add another sub, and I'll call it select range. So Then let's say the range we want to select is B2 through, I don't know, let's call it E10, and select. So what this should do is it should select the entire range that we've specified here. So this is an instance where using the range is probably more effective than using the cell. And I guess the cell actually only lets you specify one specific value, one specific location, where the range one, you can use the colon separated one to select multiple cells. Any questions here yet?
Nope.
Mm-mm.
All right. And then I guess not to make it too complex, but I'll take it one step further. So let's say we want to select a range, but we want to do it so that we have the cell referencing within the range. So I can do that by kind of coupling what we've just learned together. So instead of using the within quotes, the B2 to E10, let's say we want to look at the same range, but using the cell referencing. I can do cells 2, comma 2, and I think this should work. Cells 2, comma 2 through cells, and I guess E10 is 10, comma 5. So now if I run this one, that's a good error. So you have to have a unique name.
A different name.
Yep. So select range with cells. So that's going to do the same thing that we saw there, that we saw before, but instead of having it hard coded as B2, now or we still have it hard coded. It's looking at cells 2, comma 2 to 10, comma 5. But again, this can be nice if we want to add in some variables. We can add in even multiple variables if we want the range changing each time we loop through something. So I'll undo that for now, but just something nice to know about in terms of different ways to select a location of cells. So I think that gets us through the basics of determining or selecting a range. Any questions up through this point?
Hold on, I got errors, so I'm trying to look at what you have. Oh, got it. Okay, I'm missing end of in parentheses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So maybe just to keep this a little cleaner, I can I'll call my module 1 cell and range selection, so that when we move on to the next subtopic, maybe Marianne will find this useful when she goes through it. And then the next one, so now we're kind of getting into the second subunit of today. We'll call this one, this is going to be really inputting data into cells. All right, great. So now that we've figured out how to select a given cell, we can now begin entering data into it, and then the next step after this is going to be reading data from the cell. So we'll use the first cell referencing method. We'll say cells 1, comma 1. So this will get us to cell A1. And then, like we were looking at the dot select earlier, now we're going to look at another way of using the cell, and this one's going to be looking at the value. So when we have cell 1 comma 1 dot value, this determines what's the value within the cell. So this lets us set the value of the cell to another string or integer. So I'm going to set the value of cell 1 comma 1 to hello world, which is a common thing to do when you're learning a new language. You can set a variable to hello world. So, oh, and I forgot to do everything with our subs. So we'll call this sub write text to cell. So when I play this macro, when I run this, it will enter hello world into A1. Is everyone able to follow along with this okay through here?
Yep. Hey, I just remember something. I remember on a lot of stuff I have to do quote. What was it? In say the single, you have a quote in here. I thought I have to do.
Oh, with the comments?
Oh, maybe not comments. Yeah, I thought so.
What? Like when we comment out?
No, see, like values, I thought when you do equal or something, I thought I have to do to quote. I thought.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about with your formula.
Yeah.
Which was a bit complex. The issue might have been was when you were trying to have a quote within quotes,
Mm-hmm.
and that does get a little confusing. I think we'll get there eventually,
Okay.
but yeah, it comes when I think you had a complex if statement which
Mm-hmm.
had strings of text within it. So you, let's say, had SVP within quotes and then wanted to put that within a string. So you had to like double quote it to put
Okay.
a string within a string, essentially.
Got it.
So anyways, here we have one way of entering text into a cell. Again, the exact same thing. I won't even create a new one for this, but we could, here we'll pick another cell, A10. So we can use the range method, and here we go. We have hello world gets entered in a second location. So what we've been using so far, you might notice, is we've been staying totally within sheet 1. So in a big workbook or when you're using a macro, there's the high likelihood that you're going to be wanting to move between sheets. And let's create an example for that one. So we'll clear out the data we have just entered, and let's create some more sheets. So sheet 1, 2, and 3. If I run this macro and I'm within sheet 3, since we don't specify to change the sheet location, it's just going to print it to the same sheet as we're on currently. It'll put it on sheet 3. So let's say we want to make this a bit more exact with the location that we're sending it to. So we can say sheets, and then within quotes we have to specify the sheet name. So we can say we want it on sheet 1, and then we have to put a period so it knows that it's looking within sheet 1 at range A10, looking for the value within that cell, and it's setting it equal to hello world. So when I run this, nothing happened on sheet 3, so it doesn't actually change the sheets that you're on right now. But if I go to sheet 1, now we have the text entered into the cell that we're looking at. So any questions there?
Hold on. Hold on. Sheets. HET1. Dot. Okay, so when I do that, okay, I have to see what it looks like. So I went to the sheet 3. Okay, I got it.
All right.
Okay.
Great. So now we have a little bit of way of getting around the workbook. Let's look at one other way to bring this together with what we were using earlier regarding the select method. So let's say that I want to, instead of just entering data into a value on a different sheet, I first want to go to that sheet and then enter the value. So we can create a new sub. So we'll do select sheet and enter value. I'm probably not picking the best names for these, but want to pick some that are at least we'll know what we're talking about later on. So the first thing I want to do is
does the necessary has to be capitalized, or doesn't matter?
No, it doesn't matter. It just has to be one word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I pick something that Marianne or others who are looking at this can understand what it means. I could similarly just add a comment and say what the macro should be doing. Select sheet 1 and enter value in, I don't know, let's pick a new cell for this one. Let's say enter value in cell C5. So for this one, we can do sheets and then sheet 1. And now we're just using the select method again. So the first thing it'll do is it'll select the sheet 1. And then from sheet 1, we can do range C5 dot value equals, and we'll do hello world again. And so one thing you'll notice in VBA is to do any one procedure, there's many different ways to do it. So this is just one way of entering a value in C5 of sheet 1, but I mean, I can demo even a few more just so we know how it works and other ways of doing the same thing. So I don't know if you guys remember the nice little trick we used last time, but if we enter, or if we type cell, or sorry, if we use F8, the F8 button, that'll walk through the macro step by step so we can see what each line of code is actually doing. So I'm going to use that to walk through this one, and you guys can do the same. So if I click it, if I hit F8, it'll enter the sub. Then it'll say sheet 1 dot select. So now we see that I just jumped from sheet 3 to sheet 1. And then it will say range C5 is set to hello world, and then end sub. So that's one way of doing it. We could similarly, let's hop back to sheet 3 and delete the data from sheet 1 that we'd just entered. Instead of using this approach, setting the value of range C5 equal to hello world, let's add one more step. And so ideally you'd want to be minimizing the number of lines you're using, but just for demo purposes, I'm going to make it even a little more, like break out the steps even more so that we know what's possible. So let's say instead of doing, oh, that'll give us an error because we haven't set a variable to that yet, but sheet1 dot select, then we can go to range C5 on sheet 1 and select that, and then we can do active cell, and so we haven't really used this yet, but this will just say that wherever the cursor is located, we're setting that active cell value equal to hello world. So now if we try that again, we can go from sheet 3, I'll step through it one by one. So it'll jump to sheet 1, then it will jump to cell C5, and then within that active cell, it will enter hello world. And we'll see there's a few different ways of calling your active location, whether it's active sheet, active cell, active workbook. These all come into play and are pretty nice to have when you want to be looking at relative locations rather than absolute locations. So we'll get to that, and you guys will see how the active cell or active sheet come into play later on. But any questions up through here? Have I lost anyone, or are you guys still following along?
So far?
So
Good.
far. All right. Hey, great news. All right. So let's. I'm just looking at my little cheat sheet on the side to make sure I cover everything. So now that we've looked into a little bit of entering data into cells, now let's look at reading data from cells, and we can just go reading data from a cell and entering it into another cell. So this is going to be pretty similar to like a copy-paste approach, but just without using the copy-paste formula. That said, we can come back to it and use copy-paste as well. So again, this is something that has 2 or 3 approaches to do one task. So we'll be on sheet 1. Let's we'll enter hello world into A1. And we'll create a new macro which will take the value or the contents of cell A1, and we'll just say copy it to C4. So what we're doing here is we can say range A1 dot value, and I've accidentally done this in the wrong order. So we actually wanted to say range C4 dot value equals the range A1 dot value. So if I run this, it will just set the value of range C4 to whatever was in cell A1. And one thing to notice is that the order does matter when you're using this equal sign, or it's less, I guess it's an equal sign in some cases, but here it's really assigning the value to a cell or a variable, as we'll see in a second. But the part that's left of the equal sign gets the value that's to the right of the equal sign. All right, so we have that. Let's see what else. So let's make it a little more interesting. And up until now, we've pretty much just been using the value within one cell, but we can just as easily use and maneuver the values in multiple cells. So let's say we have numbers or strings, anything within cell A1 to A5, and then let's say we just want to copy and paste these into C1 to C5. So there's a few different approaches we can go for this. First, I'll kind of do the approach that mirrors what we've just done here, and then I can show you the copy paste approach. So I'll copy that macro. Look at read and write multiple values. So I believe this should work. So C1 to C5, that gets the values of whatever was in A1 to A5. And you see that now we've just copy and pasted what we had from A1, A5 to C1, C5. So essentially just doing the same thing we did, but you can do it with a range of cells rather than with just one individual cell. Then, as promised, one more approach to the same thing, and I'm sorry I'm doing kind of the same thing in many different ways today, but hopefully it lets you guys see that VBA, it's not just there's never just one way to do something. There's many ways, and hopefully we can find the way that's most efficient for to answer the question that we're trying to answer. But yeah, there's always many ways to do one thing. So if I were to give you guys an assignment, I'd expect each of you to come back with a different solution to it, and all three could be correct yet different. So now let's look at, instead of just setting a range equal to the values from another range, let's actually do a true copy and paste. And I would say that copy and paste approach is probably what I would use more frequently. And let's enter some better numbers in here. All right, so we have a range of numbers in cell A1 to A10. Now, what we can do, and so we're not really going to be doing anything too new to what we've done today, but we're just going to be using a different method of a different action. So whereas we've used the select and the value appendix to the ranges, now we'll be using the copy and paste ones.
Can you go back your row A1? I want to know how can you do the range numbers? How did you enter that?
So I copy and paste it as values, but if you do rand between, then you can enter the top and bottom number. So I could also do 1 to 100, and then if I just copy that down, it'll do random numbers between 1 and 100, and every time I refresh it, it'll pick new numbers for me. But we'll just copy and paste these as values.
Got it.
So with the copy paste macro, we can do range A1 through A10. And what we could do is we could say we want to select this, and then we could do active selection dot copy, or we could just do range A1 through A10 copy. So that's what we'll do here, because we'll save a line of code. And then we can select the location where we want to paste it to. So for this one, we'll do range C1 dot select, and so you can notice that when you copy and paste, you don't have to have the entire range of where it's going to get pasted. You don't have to have through C10. That's not needed here. So just range C1 dot select, and then here we can do active sheet dot paste. So now if I step through this, and I believe this should work, it'll first copy A1 through A10, then we have C1 selected, and then when it runs the active sheet dot paste, that functionality will paste the copied values into the new range that we have selected. So not too complex. I would say this is actually something definitely worth having to memory, because I do use the copy and paste functionality a lot. Much of this you can kind of just look at your notes or Google it as questions come up. But there's some basic things that you want to definitely have to memory, and the loops for and while loops are going to be very important to know, as well as this copy and paste and other things that you're using all the time. But yeah, pretty handy, gets used a lot, so hopefully it's not too many steps and something that you can recall offhand. So any questions about this at this point? All right, I guess we need some more complex subject matter for you guys.
Hold on. When I did a copy and paste, when I run the macro, how come my copy number doesn't match with column 1A?
Because you left the formula?
Huh?
You left the
Yeah.
formula random between?
Well, I did a copy values already, but they still didn't copy the same values. When I run it, so I did copy value first for column A, and then I probably need to rerun my macro. Okay, hang on. Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know why.
Well, I still have the formula random between, so I also had different numbers.
Oh, you have the same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I didn't copy paste the numbers and then just.
So once you copy and paste the value, okay, then you need to rerun your query, I think. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try it. Let's see if they will copy. Okay, now it's okay. I just need to after I copy paste value, I just need to rerun my macro. Then they will copy the same number. Okay, got it.
All right, great. So I'm wondering, given that we have about 15 minutes left, how much time we have to get into variables, which I was hoping to touch on a little bit, but I'm thinking we might be better off pushing that back to next class. So yeah. I guess for the time being, we'll look at another piece that lets us select the current region, and this is where we really start making our money's worth with VBA, because up until now we've had to tell Excel where our data is. For instance, A1 through A10. This is always going to be hard coded as A1 through A10. So let's say I add in, let's say I add in a bunch more rows. So now our data is longer. It goes down to row 16, but I still have it set as A1 through A10. So we're gonna, if we want to copy the entire column, we're gonna miss some of it. So we will now use another macro, which is gonna require the current region. So I'll do a current region, copy, and paste. So this is a really nice feature, something again worth memorizing. So let's say we want to select the entire column that we have here. Again, there's going to be a few different ways of doing that, but we'll use the current region as our probably our easiest approach. So first, what you do is you enter a cell within the region. So we can say, well, we know cell A1 is always going to be there. So we have cell A1, and then there's a few options, but we'll say current region and select. So we've added in this additional argument, which is going to say that it's going to select all of the cells that are adjacent with values to A1. And so now if I run this, it's going to select that entire region. So that's pretty nice. Now we have somewhat of a dynamic macro, which will select data, but we don't have to specify exactly where the data is, which is probably going to be the case in most situations when we're using our different types of workbooks, which the data is always changing. We don't know how many rows there are. So this is a really nice function, and then we can still use the same. If we want to do a true copy and paste, we can do the same thing we had before. So instead of having it be current region dot select, we can do current region dot copy, and then say that we want to paste the values into cell C1 or beginning with C1, and then we'll do the paste. So what happens if I run this is it should copy and paste over the whole range, which it does. So any questions here?
Nope.
Nope. All right, great.
So, okay, just one question. So it selects any, I mean, if there's any value in the vicinity, so if you have something in like B1, would it also select B1 or just column A?
Yeah. So I can make a true table, and I'll just do random integers. So we can make this a little bigger. And I'm just going to copy and paste as values, hard code these. So now let's see what happens if I do the current region, and we'll just select it. So now it'll select all of the data within that region. Let's see what happens if, let's say I have some blanks within here too. I believe it should still like identify that this is a full region. Yeah, so even with blank cells, it's pretty smart. It'll know what's within that region. I'm not sure at what point. Maybe if you deleted a full row and ran it, then it knows that that's a different region. That below that is a different table or different
All right.
piece of data. So that's a nice way of using the current region piece. And I'm seeing we're a little bit low on time, and I don't want to rush us too much with something uh, more complex. So, are there any questions about anything from today yet? No? Any?
No.
Have you guys? I know last time my little assignment for you guys was to think about different pieces within your day-to-day job that could be useful to have some VBA experience or be automated with a macro. Any ideas there yet?
Mm-mm.
Well,
Nothing.
I don't know if you heard from Sesmir, but that still hasn't been handed over to me, so no.
Okay.
Well, I have one, but it's, we can do this offline. That was just complex one.
Okay. I mean, hey, maybe next class we can, if you want to go through that, because I'm sure that everyone would find it beneficial to see like what you have a question on. So
Okay.
maybe we'll save that for next time. But if you wanna, we can end with that for the next class. Save a few minutes to do that one.
Okay.
Um, okay, so just since I know we have a few minutes left, this one I'll kind of breeze through, but just a last little example of how we can use the current region, kind of bring it all together, something that's actually might be useful. So let's say again we can make sure that the range is complete here. And oh, so I have an idea for a way to automate and streamline how you might multiply all the values in column A. Because currently the best way to do it, let's say we want to double all the values in column A, there might be two ways to do this. The first one would be multiplying it by column, let's say this is our, let's say C2 or C1, that's the multiplier value that we wanna use. So we could do this approach, multiply it down, but let's say we want our values always to stay within column A, then it becomes kind of annoying because we have to copy and paste these as values over our previous ones and delete it. That's a lot of clicking around. So maybe not something that we want to do every time. So now let's say we can take the values we have in column A1. Another thing that you guys may be familiar with is the copy and paste special. So if I copy the value in C1, I can do paste special and then multiply it. So that'll actually work. I guess we got some formatting changes as well, but that's fine. So that's one approach. But then let's say we want to automate that second approach. So I can record a macro. I'll call it multiply. And then we can say, again, we're doing the same thing we just did. And we'll do the paste special and do that multiplication. And so again, it multiplied it by 2, and we can now stop the recording. So let's try to find the macro 2 that we just wrote. Or I guess it's called multiply. So what it's doing is it's selecting the active cell. Well, we don't want it just to be the active cell. First, we want to select range C2 dot select, and then you can see that's doing selection dot copy. That's fine, and then it's multiplying it by range A1 through A28. Well, that's not great because we should set it to be the current region. So we can do range, just in case we're changing the length of how many rows we have there. Why don't we'll do current range dot current region, and then that should select everything. And now we have a new macro, and then the rest of it, this is all just what was recorded, and we don't have to change that. But so if I run this again, oh, misspelled that. Uh-oh. Looks like it is trying to copy it by zeros instead. And that's because we want range C1. Let's give us some values again. All right, take 3. So now we have a macro which is doing that multiplication procedure, and if I keep running it, it'll keep multiplying, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a nice way that we can bring some of what we learned today together. Now we have the range selection, we're copying, and then we also are using the current region here to determine where we're doing the multiplication. So this is a pretty good macro. It's dynamic, and regardless of how many cells we have in our data, it'll update and it'll run on everything we have here. So I know we're half past. Thanks guys for taking the time today. Hopefully this was a useful class. I know we're still staying pretty basic, but getting more into the coding. So does everyone have a workbook of their own where you guys were able to record and write these macros? It's probably useful to hang on to this just so you can remember and study up a little bit on the syntax for this stuff. Do you guys have everything here, or do you want me to send this out?
Yeah,
Hello. I have it, but I would like to ask you if it's possible to send me the recording, so
Yeah,
I will
same
be
thing.
like testing again, yeah. Just, to repeat it once more.
Okay, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
All right, well, thanks guys. I will post the recording video as well on YouTube. Not sure if you guys actually looked at it last time, but I'll put it back out there for Marianne, and you're welcome to use that as a resource as well. And then I'll send out the workbook too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.